I have not been to Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring gas. Welcome to Flagrant Howls, a Minnesota Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.
There he is, ladies and gentlemen. Kyle Tyge in the house from the West Coast, the West Coast representation. Last time we talked, you had just gotten done watching two of the most embarrassing Wolves losses in franchise history, and everybody thought that this team was circling the drain, the toilet. But here we are, 8-6. They've even had some time to practice over the last few days. So how are you feeling right now,
Kyle? Just reminded that if this is like the best way to sell a podcast and talking to my boss, if I could not do podcasts for the first 3 months of the NBA season, my life would be a lot easier because there's just so much like a week
unless
ago.
You're a Sixers podcast. Unless you're
well, that's like
the rights to Ricky Sanchez or whatever.
Well, and that's like a good thing too is like, hey, look at what's going on with Tyrese Halliburton right now. He looks like a shell of himself. Look at what's going on in Philly. Like, look at what's going on in all these teams. And yes, last week was a dark time and you lose 2 games and you complain about how you're already tired and we're fighting about rotations and Dane and I are at each other's throats in my office. But then you fast forward a week and it's like, hey, you know what? Actually, maybe things are fine. And maybe, and I am guilty of this as well. I am not yelling at people who listen to this, but all September and October, and then especially when that trade happened 2 days before Media Day, we all said the same thing. Let's give it 15 to 20 games, and then let's all get together, at the Fillmore or a really nice sponsor of the pod and just discuss it. And then 5 games in, we all freaked out. And it's like, wait, what happened to that policy where we weren't going to meet until after Thanksgiving? So we are a week away from Thanksgiving as we record this. And it does seem at 8-6, a couple games that you probably shouldn't have won, a couple games that you definitely should have won. 8-6 sounds about right. They're brain fart in Portland away from being 9-5, which that's, I think, 3rd in the West. So a lot of teams are going through it. I think this team did need 3 days at home to practice. Jace Frederick from the Pioneer Press had a really good article about how every time the Wolves have had these breaks, they address a lot of their issues. Yeah. So I would expect tonight in Toronto against a pretty bad Raptors team, but, on the road. Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been 20 years since the Minnesota Timberwolves last won in Toronto. Is that right?
Yeah. So, dude, Alan Horton, who's just the best. By the way, your co-host on the Wolves Radio Network, Alan Horton.
Yeah, he is the
Kyle
greatest.
Tyge. So he put out this sneaky, crazy nugget the other day. I'm just going to find it exactly. Okay, this is from yesterday, actually. Alan Horton at Wolves Radio on Twitter/X. Wolves embark on a 2-game road trip to Toronto and Boston. So tonight, Toronto, and then 2 days off, Sunday, Boston. 2 cities where they've lost a combined 36 consecutive games. 19 in a row in Toronto, with the last win coming in January of 2004. We're definitely pulling up these box scores, by the way. Asterisk, they lost. There was technically an at Toronto game in 2021 that was played in Tampa, I think because of COVID restrictions in Canada or something.
That doesn't count because they didn't have to bring their passports. So it's been 20 years since they brought their passports and won in Toronto.
And then 17 losses in a row in Boston, with the last win coming in March of 2005. So these are like KG era teams. The last time the Wolves won in either one of these cities was the first KG era, not the 10 years ago comeback. That's incredible, man. Toronto, too, it's like, okay, I know they won the title in one of those years, but that's not exactly a bastion of basketball success since 2004.
I have a January 21st, 2004 box score, if you would like that. Wolves 108, Raptors 97.
Should I try and guess some of these? Or
do you want to? Okay, so let's run this back. January 21st, 2004, the George W. Bush administration. The number 1 song on the Billboard Top 100 that year was "Yeah" by Usher, Lil Jon, and Ludacris. Great song. Can you guess the starting 5 for the? I think they're pretty healthy at this point. Can you guess the starting 5 for the Minnesota Timberwolves on January 21st, 2004?
Well, it's funny because last week we kind of talked about Wolves history lesson, some of the best regular season Wolves teams in history started really slow or like 500. And so this was a 58-win Wolves team. They were 500 into December, and then they started to pick things up. So this is I think this is when they were pretty hot for a couple months.
They're cooking at this time, yeah.
Well, so KG was starting.
Okay.
Sam Cassell, Latrell Sprewell.
Yep.
Trenton Hassel?
Correct. One more. Oh, this would be big.
It's one of 3 guys. No, it's one of 2 guys.
Not a magician. Not a magician. This guy was
okay, yeah, so Irvin Johnson.
And
right?
Then to fill out the bench,
let me get the bench.
Yeah,
Can I get everyone who played minutes?
That was the starting 5. KG played 42 minutes in that game, scored 28 points, 11 rebounds, 2 assists, no fouls in 42 minutes. God, he was good. Give me the 3 guys off the bench that played more than 10 minutes.
Was Wally healthy? Wally?
He is not in this box score.
Okay. Yeah, he was injured for a big chunk of that season. Troy Hudson?
Yes, 17 minutes, finished with 5 points and 2 assists. I need 2 more names.
Michael Olowokandi?
No. I'll give you one more guess. A guard and a big guy.
Who was the other big guy? Was it Mads? Would they run Mads? Mark Madsen run out there?
21 minutes.
21
Mark
minutes.
Madsen.
5
okay,
and then a guard.
And give me a guard.
Oh, Fred Hoiberg.
Yep. Fred Hoiberg got 30 minutes, did not score. They also, and Finchy, if you're listening to this one, they did find a way to give 2 other guys minutes in a game where they were competitive. They ended up being 28-12 after this win. But Oliver Miller played 7 minutes, and Gary Trent got 3 minutes.
I was going to guess
off the bench.
Gary Trent as one of the other ones.
So
Gary
that
Trent
was
Sr., man.
108-97 Minnesota Timberwolves over what looks to be a Jalen Rose and Chris Bosh-led Toronto Raptors team.
Bosh, man. Yeah, so this is like early Bosh.
Yep.
Because this is like 6 years before that. Was that rookie Bosh? Because he was awesome for Toronto in obscurity before going to the Heat. And
yeah, it was because he was drafted in 03. So summer of 03, then 3-4, 2003-2004 was and that was a Timberwolves time capsule brought to you by Flagrant House.
And then part 2 of Timberwolves time capsule. So you may remember the next season, which is the last time they beat Boston in Boston. They started off really slow. I think they fired Flip Saunders at some point during the season, and they were on the outside looking in with a couple months to go in the season. And they were 26-27. They start winning some games. So this is kind of when they start picking it up, and they couldn't quite finish it off to get to the playoffs. But so they go to Boston on March 6, 2005. And why don't you try guessing the 9 players that played? Only 9 players played. And there's definitely some matches here. But give me the starting 5. This is a little early in your Wolves.
So this is 2005. The Wolves beat the Celtics in Boston, just to summarize?
Yep. And I'll give you just to warm you up here. Here's who played for Boston. And this was what was the final here? 99-97 nail-biter in which the Wolves trailed going into the fourth quarter against these Boston players. Here was the starting lineup. Paul Pierce, Ricky Davis was the leading scorer for Boston.
Of course he
before
was.
being traded to the Timberwolves.
Of course he was.
Rafe LaFrentz, Antoine Walker, and aging Gary Payton.
Okay.
With Mark Blunt, Delonte West, Marcus Banks, Al Jefferson, and Justin Reed. Half these dudes were traded to the Timberwolves, if not more, within the next 3 years.
So for the Wolves in that game a year later, I mean, it still had to have been Kevin Garnett, Sam Cassell, Michael Olowokandi, Wally Zuriak.
So Cassell was hurt.
Okay.
Garnett did start. 21 points, 13 boards, 9 assists.
Okay. Was Olowokandi the starting center?
Candy was also hurt in this game, apparently.
Okay.
Or at Bellinote still clubbing the night before. I don't know.
Latrell Sprewell, was he on the team?
Spree was 3 for 9 for 6 points in this game.
Okay. I'm 15 at the time, so everyone that's yelling at me in the comments, just give me a break. Troy Hudson?
Yep. He started 10 points on 10 shots.
I don't know who else would have
The
been.
Wolves attempted 13 threes in this game, by the way.
That's how many ant attempts in the first quarter. Yeah. Now, look how far we've come. I don't know. Who else was on?
The starting center in this game, playing 38 minutes, John Thomas, former
I think he works for
former
the team
executive. Yeah, he worked for the team for a long time. He was a Gopher. And then Trent Hassel, Wally Zerbiak off the bench for 27, Fred Hoiberg, Anthony Carter, who was with the Heat for a while, and then Mark Madsen also got 15 minutes. So, yeah, all of that was the last time the Wolves won a game in Toronto or Boston. Got some work to do this weekend.
Little asterisk, because do you remember last season when the Wolves played in Boston? Do you remember that setup?
Well, they were up by 9 with 3 minutes to go. They flew in the day of the game and were without, I think, dude, the Netflix starting 5 completely omitted the fact. It was like, this is a war between Boston and Minnesota. And they ignored the fact that the Wolves, for travel and weather reasons, they flew to Boston the morning of the game. Mm-hmm. I think Gobert and Conley both sat. And so they were without like 2 huge players in that game. But they were still up by 9 with 3 minutes to go, and they squandered it.
They had won in Orlando the night before, faced a blizzard, couldn't get up. Rare that you would ever fly to a city on the day of a game. But yeah, Carl started at center, Kyle Anderson, Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Nikhil spot started. Troy Brown Jr. played. Jordan McLaughlin played. Shake Milton played. Wendell Moore, remember him? He was there. So that was like a win to me because that was a pretty impressive performance in my own personal record books. But what we're trying to say here, 10 minutes of doing Timberwolves time capsule, is that after a bad week last week, and then some, whether you think they were impressive or not impressive, 2 kind of buzzer beater wins against the Kings on Friday in Sacramento, and then on Sunday against the Suns, and then 3 days of practice. I think the team, and God forbid, right? We never know with this franchise, but should be rejuvenated and ready to kind of take on. I mean, at 8-6, man, again, they're a couple games out of the first place West, which that has always been chaotic now. The Thunder lost a dumb game. The Suns have lost 5 in a row. String together a couple wins, and next week when you sit around the table with your family, you might be talking about the first place in the Western Conference, Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah, that's kind of the funny thing about just the way that the early season NBA roller coaster. I mean, right now, again, we are 15 games in. The Mavericks would not be in the play-in right now.
It's crazy.
The Mavericks would not be in the play right now. The Milwaukee Bucks have actually strung together some wins to sneak in as the 10 seed in the Eastern Conference with 2 Hall of Famers on their roster. The Sixers, for injury reasons, chemistry reasons, vibes, everything, have the worst record in the entire league right now at 2-12. So everything is so scrambled early on. I think if you were to have told me you're not even going to watch the first month, Phil, I'm just going to tell you, just skip through these episodes and just fast forward. And I'm going to tell you that the Wolves are going to be, you can either take what I'm going to tell you or take mystery door number 2. 8-6, Anthony Edwards offense up a tick. Julius Randall meshing pretty well. Already hit a game-winning buzzer beater. Got to watch those travels according to the final 2-minute report.
Don't get me started. Keep going.
But Dante DiVincenzo basically can't make a shot through the first month of the season. And Mike Conley has been like he's shooting 32%. He did look pretty good against Sacramento. But so you're going to be 8-6, 6th seed in the Western Conference with DiVincenzo and Conley having not joined the party yet. Dillingham hasn't joined the party yet. What's my guy? Terrence Shannon Jr. just lit it up for the Iowa Wolves last night, but hasn't joined the party yet. Or you can take what's behind door number 2 at your own risk. I mean, don't you take it? Like, don't you take 8-6?
Yeah. Well, again, I think if you're asking people listening to this, would you take 8-6? They're thinking about so many dumb things that this team has done, and you're right.
Agreed.
Dumb performances against Portland, dumb, fourth quarter against the Kings, dumb first 38, 40 minutes against a Suns team that was without 2 of their stars in Booker or in Beal and KD. Dumb way to defend De'Aaron Fox and Devin Booker in back-to-back nights. But I just think, and this is the thing we all talked about in October and September, I just think these guys just need to get reps. And I know that sounds crazy because 85% of the roster right now, rotation, is still the same guys. But being around them last week, one of the things I took away was Julius Randall and Dante DiVincenzo are really good players, and both have had highs and lows already through 14 games. But they play such different styles that I even the big one for me on Dante is I just don't think he should be doing a lot of point guard stuff. Like, I think he should play more Malik Beasley than he should play Jordan McLaughlin. and you saw them start to get a little rhythm. 5 threes against the Suns. Those were 5 huge threes. He's going to get back to that, but I think he also was looking at a team that, like, my biggest takeaway, if you want to do that really quick after 14 games, is the importance for this team, maybe more than any other team, of having a point guard out there at all times. Mike can't do it. That's probably why I was, and many others were yelling about, like, Rob, because Rob's, I think, more of a traditional point guard than we thought. Nikhil's not, Dante's not, like Ant's not. So Jim did his top 5 floor generals the other night, which was fantastic. I just think they need a floor general out there at all times, even if they're not focused on scoring. When Rob's come in very limited stints, Finchie said it yesterday at practice, he just kind of zips the ball around. None of his teammates make shots, by the way, when he tries to get them assists. But like
small sample size.
Yeah, they're like he just adds a little layer to this, that if he can take a little more of Mike's backup point guard duties, and you can let Nikhil defend guys, for 94 feet, and let Dante just be Malik Beasley, they're still figuring out roles, is my bigger point. And I think you saw against the Suns, Julius Randall too, like if Ant is not open on that first option, I mean, Joe Ingles has a role now too, Phil. He's the inbounder with 3 seconds left.
He is, and he's the Mark Madsen the chief towel waver on the sidelines too. It's great. He's always the first guy enthusiastically off the sidelines when the opposing team calls timeout to stop a rally.
My buddies we've always talked about, like, what would be the best sport you could play, or like best position, and we're always talked about like bullpen catcher, because you make a couple $100,000, you just sit in the bullpen, chew seeds, and catch guys warming up. Joe Ingles making like $1.8 million just to inbound with 3 seconds left is a pretty good job. But yeah, Ant's not open on that curl, right? That play was designed for him. And I think Julius Randall just naturally, it's no shade to Karl-Anthony Towns, who is having a phenomenal year. But I think Randall's starting to be like, hey, I'm kind of built for this stuff. And that 3 was maybe something we look back on the season DVD of like, oh, everything kind of turned around at that point.
Yeah, Carl's having a crazy season for the Knicks. And
awesome.
He's shooting like 51% from 3, and and they've started to win some games. And I think he's their leading scorer above Jalen Brunson right now by a couple points per game. And also, Julius Randall just looks like a great fit with this Timberwolves team. And it remains to be seen if he's going to be a net positive compared to Cat. Once we get to the end of the year, we can kind of do more comparisons. But I don't know that Cat gets that shot off. Like, Cat's athletic in his own way, but Julius Randall has more of a twitchy guard athleticism in a 6'9" frame, where he can kind of do the crossover step back smooth, get that jumper off. And Cat has a step back, but there's some certain things that Julius does athletically that you don't see from Cat. Of course, Cat has some size and rebounding and some abilities that Julius doesn't bring, but I love the fit so far through 14 games. It's a little clunky on defense here and there, and when you put him out there with Nas, like, you better score some points. But I'm happy with the way that he has fit in. And, him and Anthony Edwards seem to have a chemistry, just the way they interact with each other too. So, yeah, I'm in. It's definitely not a disaster, and I think it's been a positive so far. And if you get anything at some point from Conley and DiVincenzo, things look up even more in the next 2 months.
And 8-6, 14 games, still really, really small sample size. But one thing I've liked from Julius, we've talked about Dante and maybe carving out a more specific role as just a guy who runs around screens. And again, I've said this multiple times, but there's a difference between being a playmaker and being a point guard. And I think Dante's a really good playmaker off the dribble and getting guys to pump fake and stuff and getting to the paint. But I don't think he's the point guard. With Julius, there's noise and all this stuff because they've had ups and downs. But I think in 4 of their 6 losses, Julius has had 3 or less assists. And then in all their wins, I mean, like against Portland, he had 2 assists per game. And then against Sacramento and Phoenix, he averaged like 6.5. Those sound like really small differences, but I just think when he gets the ball in the middle and can initiate and then kick it out, that's how they're getting these open shots. And there was some shooting regression that just, they weren't all going to shoot that bad, right? Jaden wasn't going to shoot 10% all year, Mike, Dante, and stuff. So they're well rested. There should be no reason tonight that pre or post game they tell traveling beat reporters that they're tired, because that's been a thorn in my side. So they're well rested. They play a bad team tonight, and they should. I think they're like 8.5 point favorites, Phil. They should head up to Toronto tonight and get to 9-6 and move their way up to. They might not be as high in the standings as our Detroit Pistons, who are currently 6th in the Eastern Conference, and that pick might convey next summer. But I think they'll figure it out. I think they're starting to turn it around. So maybe the worst is behind us.
Hilarious. The Pistons are 6th in the Eastern Conference, so they are above the play-in line, but they're 2 games under 500 because the Eastern Conference is the Eastern Conference.
So bad.
Yeah. So we're going to get our guy Ross Brendel in here in just a minute for a little random Wolf of the Week action, but Brickworth has jumped on board for the Flagrant Howl season here. Brickworth in the North Loop, just a couple blocks away from Target Center, and it's perfect for home and away games. For home games, obviously, get your butt in there pregame and postgame. Get some of that Detroit-style pizza, some of the best dry rub wings you're going to find, and some of the best beer in town as well. For away games, they've got all the games on TV, and like I said, steps away from Target Center, Target Field. They also have amazing swag like this. Look at this thing right here. Like that.
Oh, I love that.
To get Kyle one of these, maybe Ross.
Is that a sweatshirt or a shirt?
It's a crew neck. It's a crew neck sweatshirt here for the YouTube audience.
Yeah.
But they brew their own craft beer at the OG location in Burnsville, which you can also stop by too. But check them out, Brickworth in the North Loop. Drink the signature Nas Reed Hazy IPA. They are our friends, so they are your friends as well. Also, Nicolay Law is here as the exclusive personal injury law firm of Score North Podcasts. Nicolay Law knows that when you or a loved one gets injured, ordinary life can come to a stop and things can get complicated. That's where Russell Nicolay and his awesome team come in to help you get the compensation you deserve after an accident. So if you've been injured, get Minnesota's local award-winning injury lawyers, nicolaylaw.com, or give them a call at 1-855-NICOLAY. Here he is, producer extraordinaire, Roll the Boat Skyima, Ross Brendel.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let's
Kyle
go
has some
for this upcoming weekend.
Some breaking life news he wanted to tell us too.
Phil, as we become better and better best friends here, I just need you to trust me here where I take this. But Ross, if you may know this, there was a pretty big election recently, and I want to talk about it. I was voted the president of my HOA last night.
Oh, no, wow. No.
I don't know what to expect. I've already been on an email thread. It should be pretty chill. We've already voted to change some policies revolving around garbage cans and the landscaping company that we hire. But I just wanted to let you know, because you and I have talked about HOAs ever since this pod was created, and now I am the president of one. So I will be updating my LinkedIn here shortly after I get that friend request from our friend from last week. Who was that? Reggie Jackson? Reggie George? No.
Reggie Jordan last weekend?
Reggie Jordan. Okay, yeah. I'm still waiting for that accept button on LinkedIn. But yeah, that is the personal update in my neck of the woods.
You should know, Kyle, I have told my HOA that I intend to be done. I will serve out my term through December of 2025, but I am still vice president. And you are lucky in this sense, Kyle, newer property, right?
Yep.
Phil has heard this. You would not believe the amount of text messages and emails I get on a daily basis for an unpaid position I was voluntold into.
Well, if I quit podcasting, it's because I have been burnt out by HOAs. So.
What is the garbage controversy that you?
Oh boy,
cans out too early.
Flagrant howls. Yeah, people just hiding them around the side of their house, like that's where they're supposed to go. Mine
got to be in the garage. Got to be in the garage.
Well, but out here, we've talked about this. Like in the Northwest, you kind of use your garage as another room because it's not. You don't have to worry about blizzards and all that stuff. So people park in the driveway or the street and then use.
There are also smaller garages in the Pacific Northwest because everything is crunched together.
Except for the president's garage, my garage. Everyone come over. We're watching a viewing party next week. So that is my update.
Do you have in the bylaws, Kyle, do you have a time in which the trash cans can be out by? Ours specifically calls out, I cannot set my trash cans out before 7 p.m.
Well, and if you're listening to this and you're like, why the bleep would you have an HOA? According to Oregon and Washington law, Phil, I don't know if you know, like you have to now have HOAs in new communities. So we like have to do it. But
what is the number one benefit of your HOA?
I will report back when I know.
Kyle, do you still have to mow your lawn, or is this part of the HOA?
It's only front yard landscaping because the backyards can all be different. I have grass. I have a lawnmower. It takes me less than one song on Spotify to mow it all. But the front is supposed to be $20 a month, and they blow leaves around, so we might vote to get rid of that. Everyone saves $20. My first term as presidency, everyone is getting money back. Stimulus Tiggy.
Phil, will you green light an HOA podcast once a week for Kyle and I?
We just did. I actually think that. Listen, if the
reviews
Wolves,
on this
if the,
pod are
if
gonna
the
be-
Wolves don't snap their 2-decade losing streak in Toronto or Boston, we're flipping this feed on Monday to an
Great.
HOA podcast.
Great,
So,
Kyle and I are
big
ready.
Congratulations to Kyle. Maybe you can learn from Ross what it's like to be, near the head of an association.
He's already ascended to president. I'm just vice president. I serve at the pleasure of the president of the Lake Grove Townhome Association.
You're ceremonial. Oh man! So Ross is.
I'm a definite puppet.
Ross is going to give us a series of clues here. This is the random wolf of the week. So far on the season here, Kyle has 2 wins to my 1 win. All time, Kyle has 25 wins to my 13. The 3 random wolves in year 2 here: Randy Brewer, Reggie Jordan, and Kevin Garnett. Sneaky made the random wolf of the week list. So we're going to get up to 3 incorrect guesses each. We can shout out answers whenever we want. We also get a bonus heat check guess after Ross's first clue. No Googling. You may Control F search for previous random wolves to make sure we haven't done one. Here we go.
I really hope there are people sitting at their office right now Control Fing. They've been keeping track of all the random wolves. I hope it's not
Ross,
just
we
us.
did 20 minutes on a 2004 box score and then 20 minutes on the HOA, so I just hope there's anyone still listening. This might be the least listened to episode ever.
You know what? This one's going to bring them back. We start with this. The random wolf of the week, ladies and gentlemen, is a current NBA player.
Oh, yes. All right. Update the score. I win.
Wow.
You like that?
No,
well,
no, Kyle's right. I feel like if it's like this player played in the 80s, I have a real shot.
Kyle, why don't you go first with your heat check? Current NBA player.
Tyus Jones.
Oh, come on.
What?
That's correct. It is.
Let's go.
Oh,
Heat
man.
check.
What a week for Kyle.
Seriously, it's right here. Where is it? Right there. Can you see that? That's really blurry. It's Tyus Jones.
President of his HOA, and he's the first ever heat check winner.
I had so many good clues to give you. I feel robbed.
We're not even at a half an hour mark. Can you go through the clues quick? Because I would like to know where it takes us here on this journey.
Dude. Wow.
Very quickly, let me tell a random hilarious story that does tie into Tyus Jones, but I think about this literally every time I see his name. So my sister worked at a Montessori years ago, about 20 years ago. Okay, and she watched a bunch of kids in the Apple Valley area. So about 10, 12 years ago, my brother-in-law tells me this story. He's watching the national championship game between Wisconsin and Duke. And I'll throw my sister under the bus on this one. She walks into the room and goes, I know those people. And they're showing people in the crowd. And my brother-in-law goes, you don't know those people. And she goes, no, I know those people. And he goes, you don't know those people. Those are Tyus Jones's parents. He plays basketball for Duke. And my sister literally goes, baby, Ty plays basketball for Duke? So she watched Tyus and Trey. And I go, so now every time I think of Tyus Jones, the first thought in my head is baby Ty. Baby Ty plays for Duke. So, okay, here are some of your clues.
Baby Ty, nice little gig with the Suns. Little bounce back contract next year.
Baby Ty's done well for himself. I think that was one of my clues somewhere. Yeah, I'm just going to do some of them at random. Do you guys want to guess how much money he has earned?
Should we guess the clues too?
Yeah, go
Let's
ahead.
see if Kyle can guess the clues.
I was actually looking this up now, but Phil, you should. This is actually a fun one because it's going to blow your brain. How much money do you think Tyus Jones, it looks like he's played in the league now 9 years. Mm-hmm. How much money do you think Tyus Jones has made?
So, hold on. I'm going to get this. So his rookie deal he was like a mid first round pick or like 20th. So that's going to be, he signed, it's less than 30. It's like 26 million.
Ooh.
So I worded that in a way that Ross would appreciate, and I was like, oh, you're going to be surprised. It's way more than that.
Oh, really?
I am surprised as well.
Hit him with it, Kyle. What is it?
Well, I guess it's a first round pick.
$4.4 million.
Wow.
He did have a 2-year, $30 million deal with the Grizzlies that really kind of bumped that up. And I had forgotten about that too. And then prior to that, I think he had a 3-year, $26 million deal with the Grizzlies. So Baby Ty Ty has plenty of money to create a Baby Ty Ty center.
And
for
you
kids
could
who can't
argue
read
that
good.
he's getting screwed financially this year. Like he's playing for like NBA minimum wage, right?
And
Isn't he a veterans minimum guy?
My story, I'm not going to reshare it, but I just remember giving him a ride home one day when he was a high schooler, like coming in for Cheryl to like do scout team against the Dynasty Lynx. But he deserves. I mean, I hope it works out for him this year because he's such a great kid. But I don't know, man. That gets risky when you start taking pay cuts in the league. I hope he gets a deal next year that's like 4 years, $40 million. But he's on a winning team. He's a big part of that, right? I think he starts for them now over like Monty Morris. But I don't know. I don't know if I would have been giving him the advice of like, hey, take a minimum deal with a good team when, you know, that next contract's never guaranteed. So I'm hoping for him.
I'm more or less, Kyle, I'm just thinking, I hope Tyus has swooped in and maybe given you a little bit of money. Because were you living in Minneapolis at the time?
I was living in Dinkytown in a sublet apartment. So, yeah.
Dinkytown to Apple Valley is a bit of a drive. You had to drop him back off in Apple Valley?
My dad's Tahoe, too. What a personal story I've just been sharing. Give me another clue, because that one would have $64 million in 9 years. That's a good chunk of change.
Well, I would have went with played college basketball in the ACC. Did you know, this actually surprised me, he only averaged 5.1 points per game with the Timberwolves. I would have guessed it was higher than that.
No, because he kind of played that Jordan McLaughlin role when he'd come in, right? He'd kick the ball around and basically keep things flowing.
Already 4 different NBA teams and 3 different numbers in the NBA. That always cracks me up. I know if you go somewhere and they already have your number, I get changing it. But if you're just changing it to change it, I always find that odd. McDonald's All-American, national champion. Kyle would have nailed this because he dropped him off there. Hails from Dakota County, Minnesota. I was not going to give you Apple Valley, but I was going to give you the county.
I'm bad with the counties. I'm bad with the counties.
This will also make me sound bad. I think I know this, but the fact escaped me. Mr. Basketball 2014.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I should have known that. Yeah. His brother Trey also plays in the NBA. That would have been your final clue.
Okay.
We might have done this before, but at some point we probably should have Jim Pete do an updated like Mount Rushmore of Minnesota basketball. It could be men's and women's, but just off the top of your head, when I say that out loud, do you think Tyus? Do you think
when you
Tyus
say
is on there?
of Minnesota, is it have to be born in Minnesota?
They have to be
or
born
played
in
high
Minnesota.
School?
Ooh, now you got me over a barrel.
Because Kevin Garnett is.
Yeah, nope. It's got to be born in Minnesota.
And this is where, are there any people that you would think like Kevin McHale? I think he was born in Hibbing, right? I think, or he went to Hibbing.
Yeah.
Well, we just talked about one last week or 2 weeks ago. Randy Brewer would probably be on that. I would think.
Would he be on the Mount Rushmore?
I think he'd be on the Mount Rushmore more than Tyus. No, me.
Would Lindsey Whalen?
Lindsey Whalen has to be.
Whalen's
Lindsey
on there.
Whalen's in the conversation. Kevin McHale.
Michael Thompson.
Flip Saunders, just for like his coaching and played for the Gophers. You said Michael Thompson, right?
Yep.
Yeah, this would be a good exercise. Jim Peterson, and if you included
Jim Pete's on there.
Post-playing career stuff, yeah.
Chris Humphries, off the court resume? No? Anyone?
Pretty good. It's pretty good. Kyle, great work, man.
Nice job.
This is the best pod we've ever done. And I think we talked about the current Timberwolves 42 seconds. So, Wolves Raptors, 6:30 Central Time start tonight. Jim and Grady on the call, and we'll see what happens.
Let's go snap a couple of streaks here. Let's go make it happen here for the first time since 2004. All right. For producer Ross, he's Kyle, I'm Phil, and this is a Timberwolves lifestyle podcast.